I'll have some coffee. Just, black coffee.
You want coffee? Okay.
No, it's all right. Just black coffee. I hope you have kosher milk. Just. I hope the milk is kosher. Just some black coffee.
You didn't check the cow.
Yeah. Well, you joke about it, but a cow, if the cow isn't kosher, which is not theoretical, it's a real problem. A cow, even a kosher animal, can be non-kosher. If, for example, there's 18. Thank you very much. There are 18 various defects. There are 18 defects in an animal, 18 halachic defects, physical defects that make an animal halachically unkosher, called treifas. But we in our common modern parlance, we use words wrongly. So we say something is treif. We're talking normally about pork or not, or shrimp or lobsters. In fact, the Torah never uses the expression treif, terefa, with regard to the animals that are non-kosher, or the fish, whatever, that are non-kosher. The Torah uses the word treifa with regard to an animal that has been torn. The word treifa means to be torn. If an animal is torn in the field, in other words, when an animal has been injured, or even if it's not been injured from an external thing, it's damaged in a way in which it's going to die, it becomes not fit for kosher consumption. Now, this is a big problem.
Even if you shecht it before it dies?
Absolutely. In other words, after they shecht it, they check these 18. Nowadays, or not just nowadays, thank you very much. We don't check all 18 because most of them, we rely on the principle of chazaka and roiv, which says that most animals, these things aren't a problem unless you have a reason to suspect it. But for example, an animal that has a hole, an infection in the lungs, a bronchitis infection that damages the lung wall, that animal becomes treif. So that's something.
But if you milk a cow, you can't see the lungs.
So this is the problem. Here we're getting to it. This is exactly the problem when you say that we hope the cow was kosher. It's an actually serious halachic problem. It's not a new halachic problem. The Gemara already discussed it, because it's only after you shecht an animal that you can start to check the inner organs to determine if the animal is.
Give milk anymore.
But she doesn't give milk anymore once she's shechted. In fact, I'll tell you even more. Going again off the point, an animal that's been shechted, the milk of a cow that's no longer alive, there was milk removed from the cow's udder after the cow died, is to mix it with meat. The prohibition of meat and milk, to mix that milk with meat, would only be forbidden rabbinically and not in a Torah. Even though it's milk from an animal that's already shechted.
Okay.
And what's wrong?
I can't see the.
It's fine. It's not enough.
No,
it's fine. It's
fine.
Yeah, it's just a taste.
Okay.
Still in the cow.
When it's still in the cow, in other words, when it's removed.
Not you milk it, then you
No, not you milk it. No, absolutely, it's still in the cow. But now I'll tell you this about this thing is, you're right. If you haven't shechted the cow, you can't start checking the inner organs to make sure that the cow was not damaged previously. To make sure the cow hasn't been damaged. In which case, every time you milk a cow, how do we know that the cow is right now kosher? Maybe it's damaged internally. That is chazaka, exactly. So we drink milk on the chazaka, on the last known status that a cow starts off its life not being damaged. A healthy cow that externally looks healthy is not damaged. We're not suspicious that it's been hurt internally in a way that makes it a treifa, and we can continue to drink milk on that assumption. But now I'm going to tell you a bombshell, which is, if you ask a contemporary sheichet, or a contemporary person who works in the industry of shechita, what percentage of cows are actually deemed after shechita to be kosher?
Very low.
It's a low percent. It's under 50%. In other words,
50%. That's one of the things why the meat.
is so expensive. That's right. You know, we've got a major risk. Absolutely, that's one of the determining factors why kosher meat is expensive. Is because they take, let's say, a batch of, let's say 30 cows. They shecht all 30. They check the lungs, and they discover that of those 30 cows, 20 of them were no good. 20.
Yes.
And 10 are good. So the 20 that are no good, they sell off to the goyim, so they don't make a major loss. They make a smaller loss.
That's not why markets went.
I don't know why they went under. You have to ask maybe a specialist in the business industry to know why they went under. But this is a problem though, because if you have, let's call it 66 or 70% of cows that turn out to be not kosher after shechita, then we no longer have this principle of roiv. We're not relying on the majority when we drink milk, because we're now saying actually most cows walking around in the field are not kosher. So how can we just drink milk? The bombshell of a problem. The answer is it's not really true. Now, don't go around and repeat in my name, please, that Rabbi Stanton said that actually all the cows are kosher and they're just being strict. In the last, I'd say 500 or so, no more, 700-800 years, we started to, we became, good morning.
Numbers are difficult. Okay.
No problem. We're just having an off-the-point discussion about milk. In the last 800-900 years or more, we Jews became less and less familiar with the precise determination of a damaged lung. In other words, the lung has to be smooth. It can't be damaged. So it's checked internally and sometimes externally, internally in the abattoir. We lost the skill of knowing what's considered to be a true damage and what kind of adhesion. An adhesion is like a sticky part in the lung. What adhesions in the lungs do not constitute real damage, but it's the sign that damage could have begun, but not actual damage has happened. There's no internal piercing of the lung or something like that. So basically, we, and the Shulchan Aruch already, the Sfadim are even more, those who follow the opinion of the Mechaber and Shulchan Aruch, the author, are even more strict. But basically, we err completely on the side of caution, and anything that feels to the trained expert boider, the one who checks the internal organs, anything that feels to be the beginnings of a damage, we consider to be treif. The reality remains, though, that this is a halachic chumrah. Now, it's a halachic chumrah that we have no way out. We have our hands tied behind our back because we have, all Jews all over the world have bound themselves up with this stringency. It's codified in Shulchan Aruch, this stringency. There are more takes on this stringency in Shulchan Aruch, that we err on the side of caution, that we're very careful not to have anything that could, however, because we're uncertain. And for that reason, we can't just choose to be lenient because we don't know. The stringency is based on a lack of knowledge. A lack of knowledge, if you're in doubt, you have to err on the side of caution, especially when we're talking about a Torah law. But the reality as far as heaven is concerned still remains the case that we can assume that, like in the time of Chazal 2,000 years ago, they took on a principle that most cows walking in the field are not considered treifa. So with regard to drinking milk, we can take on that principle. We can say that so long as we haven't yet checked the cow and the cow is still alive and the cow's walking around, we can assume that it's one of the kosher cows, taking on that most cows, at least at the beginning of their life, all cows do not have a problem with the lungs. That's certain. And the problems develop over time, in which case it's only at the moment of shechita that we find ourselves tied up with this halachic stringency. But beforehand, when it comes to drinking the milk, we can assume that the milk is from a non-treif animal. But I'll just tell you that in abattoirs, in Israel, for example, in not abattoirs, sorry, in barns, in milking barns, where they have lots and lots of cows, often cows have problems. A cow might, let's say, have a cesarean section to remove a fetus, to remove a calf. The cow is having problems delivering at birth, maybe do a C-section. Such a cow becomes a treifa. It becomes, again, one of these. So in the kosher milking places, they have this added level of, it's a stringency, it's an added level of stringency. Basically, they put like a chip, like a little chip in the cow's ear. And every morning when the cows go in to be milked, it gets scanned by an electronic scanner, and the scanner knows the medical information, the medical history of this cow. And if the cow has had an operation that would make it into a treifa, then it's the gates don't open, or it's sent to another milking place, and the milk doesn't mix with the milk. That's whatever. So they have methods in which ever. Now, when it comes to milk from a non-kosher effect, a non-kosher, when I say non-kosher, I mean a non-supervised barn out of Israel, then in reality, we're not worried about that, because we can assume when the milk comes to our table that most milk does not come from cow. Again, the same principle of most. So we don't need to be worried if we don't know about it. The problem is if you owned a barn and you know that cow there has had a C-section, has had an operation, then you wouldn't be able to mix that milk in, because you can't sort of like bring the milk to you and say, well, it's happened already, it's been mixed in. If you know that you're mixing in milk that's not kosher with milk that's kosher, that's a problem. Anyway, right, that was a little introduction.
So it's safer to buy milk in a supermarket than at the farm where you have only one cow.
We have only one cow, yeah. We have only one cow, yeah.
You go there, you decide on yourself, you know it's kosher.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the milk in supermarket, it's hardly.
So it's the modern equipment
milk
becomes more and more complicated.
It does. I'll tell you another instance of that.
It's all life.
I'll tell you another.
Becomes complicated.
I'll tell you another instance of that. You see this a lot in Kashrus, in the wider international Kashrus industry. I don't work in Kashrus. I'm speaking just from a very superficial understanding of it. No, please. I have to be honest with you. It's one of the things I hope if Hashem helps me to give a parnosa, stay out of Kashrus. No, Kashrus is very, very important. It's absolutely important that people around the world, that Jewish people, have kosher food to eat. Someone has to do it, but it's become a very big business industry. Which is fine. Business is also fine. People go to work, they make business. But I like to be able to teach Torah, and I'm not a businessman by nature. It's not by choice. I'm not business minded. I'd get lost in the world of commerce. I'd make a transaction with a factory and they'd take advantage of me, and I'd lose all my money. You have to know what you're good at. You have to know your thing. But in the international Kashrus industry, Mr. Hochheimer pointed out that with modern technology, it's made it then, by this example of milk, it makes it more complicated, not less complicated. We can start really and just tell, here we're talking about, but it's made it more complicated. It's true, it's made it more complicated, and in some ways even more so, because there was always a principle in the Shulchan Aruch. I'll tell you an example of this. The halacha says explicitly in the Shulchan Aruch, and it was the observed halacha by everyone, there was no stringent opinion, that roiv kalim einon b'nei yoimon. That means that if a non-Jew cooks something, that's not a problem of bishul akum. Bishul akum is a separate problem. It has to be obviously something that could be eaten raw, or a food that doesn't come into a banquet, doesn't come into an expensive meal, an exquisite meal. But as long as it doesn't fall into the problem of bishul akum, we can say, the Shulchan Aruch says, that we don't know what did he use his pot for. Forget bishul akum. Let's say he just cooks up a very simple dish of lots of vegetables eaten raw, carrots. They have a carrot juice, and he cooks it in a pot. Their carrots are eaten raw, no problem with bishul akum. But the question is, what did he use his pot for previously? Now we know if he used his pot previously in any time in the last 24 hours, certainly for treifa food, for pork, whatever, then the food that he now cooks, the kosher food that he now cooks, becomes treif, becomes non-kosher. And so the Shulchan Aruch says that if we don't know what he used his pot for, we can take on a principle that roiv kalim, stam kalim shel goyim einon b'nei yoimon. That means, as far as we're concerned, whatever he used was more likely, it's a complicated halachic route to get there. It's actually a spek steak, it's a double doubt, the Rashba says, but it's more likely to have been used previously more than 24 hours ago than less than 24 hours ago, in which case the food from more than 24 hours ago only doesn't, when a pot has been used for treif more than 24 hours previously, it doesn't contaminate the food anymore. We, Jewish people, rabbinically, cannot cook with a pot that's treif to begin with. You can't cook with a pot.
Even if the pot is older than 24 hours?
Older than 24 hours, nothing. Even if it's a year old, unless it's been kashered, you can't cook with it. But a goy, a non-Jew, has no problem of cooking with his pot. He's allowed to cook with his pot. The only question is, does it contaminate the food? In terms of contaminating the food, it doesn't if it's more than 24 hours.
He said also they had to use coffee with milk in a restaurant, in a non-kosher restaurant.
Now, coffee is a little bit better because the pots that they use for coffee are not
coffee.
used. It's coffee
Yeah.
pots. They're not used. They don't boil
Yeah,
up
the
the shrimp.
It's
and-
poured
yeah.
out the cup.
In the cups.
And maybe the cup could be used for.
But there, that's a good point. But the cup is already a cliché, and a cliché might anyway not have the same principles, like in Shabbos and the laws of
Yeah,
Shabbos.
everybody
Yeah.
accepts it, but
Yeah,
we
yeah.
still do it.
And generally speaking, most people will use the cups in
So
whatever.
it would be also safer to boil it, to poach an egg instead of boiling it. Because
Then you know it's been used in a
no,
designated.
Because if it's boiled, then there's something in it. You don't see it anymore when it's a hard to boil egg.
Oh, you don't know what's been put in it.
And if you poach it first,
Then you know what's
instead
in
of
it.
boiling
Maybe. But so I say that there was this principle of most vessels of non-Jews are not b'nei yoimon, are not 24, are more than 24 hours old, and therefore you can cook in it. And therefore, you can cook in it, therefore you can use the food that was cooked by a non-Jew in his pot. Today, it's much more problematic because today, when we go into the factories, those rabbonim or organizations that go into the factories are absolutely aware with a log. They have an exact detailed log of what the various machinery, pots, whatever have been used for in the last 10 minutes, 20 minutes, everything's logged. So we're not just relying on like a vague principle. If you know that it's been used 3 hours ago for non-kosher, if you are aware, of course we can't rely on that principle. The principle of the Shulchan Aruch is just that we can take on an assumption that when the cooked carrot comes to the supermarket and we don't know working backwards what kind of pot it was cooked in, we can make an assumption that it was likely more to be a pot that was more than 24 hours old than less than 24 hours old. But when you're in the factory and you're the rabbi with the big beard and you're there in the factory and you're seeing cooking carrot juice, and on the thing it says, on the computer screen, it says the log. I only once went to visit a factory for manufacturing processes. When there was a mashgiach that couldn't go ever, and they asked me to go. It was in Eindhoven. There's a lot of factories in Eindhoven, and they asked me to. It was just after Sukkot, so I didn't have koil that day. So I drove down to Eindhoven, and it was a factory that produces spices, that blends spices. Enormous. Maybe for you you're more familiar. I was blown out my mind by the size of a factory that all it does is blend spices. It doesn't even crush them. It takes spices that have been crushed maybe in the Far East, they're imported, and it just does blends of different spices for manufacturers. So we were doing a run for Heinz ketchup, Heinz tomato ketchup. And Heinz tomato ketchup used to have a blend of, it's like 6 different, it says on the ingredients, celery and garlic and paprika, whatever. And all they do is they just blended about 150 kilo of spice just for the kosher run of Heinz ketchup. The kosher Pesach run, of Heinz ketchup, 150 kilo of spice. And you can imagine how much spice goes into a bottle of ketchup, not a tremendous amount. It was ginormous. And anyway, in this factory, by every blending machine, it's like each blending machine is a room as big as this. There's a big screen, a huge computer screen, and it literally shows everything that's being done today and being done and everything. So if you were to see, technically speaking, there, it was cold, dry things. If you were to see a pot and you see the log in the factory at the side, and it says it was just recently used to make the chips, the potato chips that have the bacon flavor on it, and the bacon flavor has a derivative from real bacon, if it did, whatever, then you can't just say, oh, well, it's okay. So our knowledge in the industry has actually sometimes made it more complicated. That's another example. All right, anyway.
Very complicated.
It is.
One question that I once encountered ice, well, not ice cream, but ice, and it was made in dairy equipment, but it was cleaned. And so actually it's part of it. But it's a strange action because it states explicitly made in dairy equipment, but it's part.
The Ben and Jerry's vegan ice cream says on it, dairy equipment.
And I found it very confusing.
No one's really sure exactly what this dairy equipment means. No, it's not clear if there is. I remember debating it at the time a few years ago when they first came on the shelves, these vegan. I don't know exactly what the halacha determines about this dairy equipment. Well, there's no question those who drink anyway dairy without supervision, then of course there's nothing to discuss. It's written as a warning for those who are careful not to drink dairy that's not under supervision. But I don't know exactly what it means dairy equipment. I don't know if it means that it was dairy equipment within the last 24 hours. I know they did a run in the last 24 hours. There's other ways out of it as well. Right, maybe for another time. We won't discuss Hilchos Shabbos. Do you want to start? It's on. It's already on. Oh, it's good. Oh, so they heard all this.
Everything is on the tape also.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, no,
No.
this is.
All right.
Yeah, people looking afterwards. I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes. People sometimes come to me. You forgot to go to tape it.
Tape it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But if Heinz, they make a ketchup,
Yeah.
tomato ketchup with spices, and the spices are crushed already in the Far East.
Yeah.
Then you have to be in the Far East to the source of because you have to check that, and they do that.
Eddie over show.
Well, I'll tell you
Was
actually, these
several times in Far East.
these big bags, huge sacks of spices that came in were stamped with a letter from the NIK. So the Manchester based in Manchester were doing a run, and the NIK had taken the first part. The NIK had taken the first part, and then they go from there. But Paul is right. Different products have different. Those who are knowledgeable in the industry, which I said I'm not, those who are know that various products could have, some factories have less likelihood of a problem, some more. And so you can sometimes you can go to a factory once a year and be absolutely certain that there's nothing. It's like I said to factories today are very miyuchad, they're designated for whatever they do. And this spice factory isn't boiling up lobsters. It's not cooking tuna fish. It's just doing spices. So maybe in these Far East, wherever, where they're actually crushing the spices, that it's probably everything there is plant-based in these factories. So I can't say with certainty because I've got no idea. I'm just saying that sometimes you would have to have a mashgiach fly out every time, every run. Sometimes a mashgiach would fly out once a year, and sometimes not even once a year, depending on what exactly is going on and what the chance of a problem is.
How about the transport? If the transport transported before unkosher things, and they put now the spices in.
So that's also a question. Then you'd have to know, is the previous product, does the new product come in contact with the previous product? Now, for example, here with these bags of spices, Paul said it's just bags wrapped, sealed round. So technically speaking, there's there's nothing. It could be transported as far as we're concerned in anything. Could be sent by post in the airmail, by regular airplane. There's no problem. But there's another thing, though, of course, of transporting things that need to be kosher, specifically need to be kosher, need a hechsher. And there you have to do, double wrapping, or double stickers, whatever. So fine. So things like meat, whatever, but spices, a spice is a spice. So there's not really much that could. In that sense, there are spices that are derivatives from animal extracts, from animal derivatives, whatever. But let's say it says garlic. So it's garlic. Garlic is probably 100% garlic with maybe a little bit of some kind of either preservative agent or an anti-caking agent. An anti-caking agent makes it, the garlic is naturally moist. It's not dry. So when they dry it out and then crush it. Am I right? Am I right? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Again, I know I'm even hesitant about the things I'm saying because it's not my area of expertise. From what I understand, garlic is moist. It has to be dried and then crushed and then ground. But because it's got a natural moisture, then it can clump together. Even before you start cooking with it over your pot and the steam goes in and makes it all clumpy. So they put in a very small amount of an anti-caking agent, some kind of chemical that stops it from clumping together or whatever. So in some way, yeah. So sometimes I think that Rav Wolf once told me that you do have to be careful. Whatever he said, basically he said that most cases it's okay, but you have to be careful to make sure that the anti-caking agent isn't a derivative of an animal product, because they could use an animal product to make. Fine, no, that's a different one. But But in terms of transporting spices, it's not really a problem. Where you do have a problem with transportation, for example, is things like oil. Oil is transported in a tanker. We're not talking about oil when it's already bottled. Oil is produced in one factory, whatever, let's say sunflower oil or canola oil or whatever, these different vegetable oils. And then it's transported sometimes in a massive, like a petrol tanker, like these huge tankers. It's transported from one place to another to the bottling factory. And in the bottling factory, it's bottled. When it's transported, there could, again, theoretically, potentially, it doesn't mean there is a problem here today in Holland, but there could, in theory, be a problem of transporting the oil in a tanker that previously was used to transport an oil that comes from an animal product, like oils that have different oils have animal. Some oils are made with animal fat in it, in which case the previous oil is kosher. Now, I can tell you, again, not with absolute certainty, with conviction, that in today's modern world, they clean out the tanker before they put in the new oil. Right? Everything's done because of allergens, because of allergies, because of all different reasons, health and safety, contamination, whatever. If there was previously animal fat in the tanker, they probably have a special way of cleaning out the tanker before they put in the vegetable oil. But halachically, it doesn't help. I'll tell you why. Because if you have, according to most opinions, if you have, let's say, cold animal oil, not hot, cold animal oil that sits in a pot for 24 hours, there's a principle called kovush kumavushal, which means when you allow a cold liquid to sit inside a pot, a jug, a tank, whatever it is, for 24 hours, the product goes into the walls of the pot in the same way as if you cooked it. Kovush means to allow something. It basically literally means to pickle, but it doesn't mean to pickle. It means to allow to stay. Kimavushal is as if you cooked. Just with bishul, with cooking, as soon as it hits a certain temperature, then the pot already becomes contaminated, the walls of the pot. With kovush, with leaving something overnight, it takes 24 hours. So if you have a tanker that had animal fat in it, cold animal fat for 24 hours, and then you now put cold vegetable fat, even if it had been totally cleaned in the inside, but the walls of the tanker halachically are contaminated, and that contamination can go back into the regular oil if the regular oil now sits there as well for 24 hours, because again, it's not hot. So it sits there for 24 hours and whatever. Sometimes it is hot. I don't know how hot it gets to when they put it into the tank. I don't know what the temperature is when they manufacture it. But basically, you could have a problem. From what I've heard from Revolve, just practically speaking, forgetting the halacha, in this part of Europe, it's not a problem. In other words, the tankers are not being used both for animal products and for animal oils and for vegetable oils. Revolve says that's for that reason, I personally as well, buy the oil in the jumbo oil, the supermarket oil, because it's not used. Apparently, the transportation isn't done at all in this part of Europe with animal fats. Maybe even animal fats aren't produced in this part of Europe. I don't know. But
out of curiosity, I lived a long time in Italy, and we had our own olive trees in the garden.
oh, very nice.
But most of the olives were picked by Goyim. Does that influence?
No.
No, I just want to know.
With grapes, though. Grapes, not the picking, but grapes. If you have a basket, grapes, there's a problem with wine of non-Jews. If you have a basket full, a barrel full of grapes, the weight of the grapes on top of each other, they already start to grapes. Some of them are broken open, some of them aren't. Especially nowadays, how they pick the grapes off the vine in the commercial industry, not personal people who have a little vine on their tree, a little grape on their vine, but commercially they go with like a kind of like hoover, like a kind of machine, and it sucks the grapes off the vine. And when it does that, the grapes come bashing together and they start ready to break. And when they're in, they then go into like some kind of barrel on a tank that's attached to the whatever. And at some stage, the tank is all the grapes are poured out into another tank where they go through a crushing process and they're sifted, they're drained off. So the oil goes, the wine, it's not yet wine, the grape juice goes to one part and the grape skins and the grape pips, the seeds go elsewhere, the flesh goes elsewhere. Now, that moment of pouring, you're not just pouring a barrel full of grapes, you're actually pouring a barrel of grapes that already has liquid grape juice with it because the grapes have already started to break apart, the weight of the grapes and the way in which they're taken off tree. That pouring can't be done by a non-Jew in commercial grapes. So when you say about picking, with olives, there's no problem, but with grapes, it would even be a problem because the picking is fine. The guy who drives the truck can drive the truck, that can be a non-Jew, but as soon as they press the button to tilt, he's pouring the first bit of what's already called wine. It's already extracted wine. And that's a problem. I don't know exactly which stage exactly it becomes, whatever, but there could even be a problem as early on as the pouring from the big vat on the truck into the factory. There could already be a problem of non-Jews operating the machinery because of wine. Okay.
Okay.
No.
Introduction.
Yeah, it's all
No,
this.
it's also interesting.
It's just the only shame is that we could have advertised that we're going to say the first 35 minutes are going to be about Hilchos Kashrus, and we'll see what will happen in the next 25 minutes because nothing is
Doesn't
certain.
matter.
It's fascinating, all these things. I find it very fascinating. Right, let's talk a bit. We carrying on about the melachos of Shabbos. We will talk a little